Welcome to this special edition of Astro Live about the nodes, the nodal special, Rahu and Ketu. That's what we're going to be talking here today. And I am joined by the lovely guest, Emily. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to do this today.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. It's fun to do some work with you, and I know you've been recently kind of diving deep into the nodes, as have I. So, we were talking and thought this would be a good time that we can kind of share what we've been looking into recently. And then after we get through a kind of brief presentation, I will post a link on Twitter so that you guys can join the show, call in and we can read your chart live online. There should be enough time to do that. I hope we can get to everyone, but there's usually more demand than we can get to. We can't have these streams be 5 hours long. So, um, yeah, without further ado, I was going to start this stream by talking about, um, the myth of Rahu and Ketu, right? Because Rahu and Ketu, or the north node as Rahu, the south node is Ketu. These points in astrology are, more developed in the Vedic system, right? There was, there's some, Hellenistic astrologers, Dorotheus comes to mind, that did talk about the nodes in the books and, applied them. But the most of the material that we have from Rahu and Ketu comes from the Vedic tradition, um, and um, but there's Rahu and Ketu are embedded into the myths of like the Vedic religion, right, and Hinduism as well. So um, just to start off with the basics, right? So Rahu, like the word graha, means to grasp, right? So that should give you an immediate idea of the nature of Rahu. It's this grasping, reaching, attempting to collect, right? Energy, right? So Rahu origin. All right. So in um, in the Puranas, right, there is a being known as Kasyapa, right? So Kasyapa, he has 13 wives, right? And he is the progenitor of all living beings. Kasyapa was created by Brahma, right? So with each of these 13 wives, when he mates with them, he produces a different kind of being, right? So Kasyapa mates with this giantess, right? Samika, right? So when they mated, apparently the giantess was bugging Kasyapa and wanted a child at the wrong time. And this caused a problem, right? And she gives birth to Rahu, who was, quote, who was dreadful like the god of death, right? So that's the origin of Rahu. Is that he's one of these kind of like, primordial demon figures, a descendant of Kasyapa, right? So there's types of beings that are relevant here for this discussion because Kasyapa with his 13 wives, there's other types of beings that are descendants, right? So there's divas, also known as suras, and asuras, right? So the divas are they're both supernatural beings, right? The divas are the good ones, the asuras are the evil ones. Um, they are vaguely similar to angels and demons, right? You could kind of think of them, but they're not really the same at all, right? But that is, if you have no exposure to, the kind of Vedic mythology and pantheon, then you could roughly think of these divas and asuras as roughly equivalent to angels and demons, right? So, in one version of the myth from the Puranas, Rahu battles the divas, right, the good ones, and he loses, right? So he's embarrassed and angered by this humiliation, and Rahu retreats to the Himalayan mountains for thousands of years. Then, there's some plot that happens that we'll skip over, but basically Brahma appears before him to grant him whatever he wished, right? And Brahma is the creator of the universe, right? So when Brahma asks Rahu what he wishes, Rahu asks to be granted immortality, right? To be made a planet, to have victory over the devas, and to be able to devour the sun and the moon, right? Now, because of the situation, Brahma has no choice but to grant Rahu these requests. But as usually is the case, there is a hitch, right? The gods find some kind of loophole in this contract. And so uh, Vishnu cuts off Rahu's head, making sure that even though Rahu could swallow the sun and the moon, they would quickly reemerge from his severed neck. All right. So after beheading Rahu, Vishnu says to Rahu, "In your respective periods, you may devour the two luminaries, and thereby indicates the good and bad things in the world." Right. So this is important because the interpretive nature of the eclipse is like the hit Rahu devouring the two luminaries are the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse, right? And so the interpretive nature of the eclipses as pretending good and bad things for the world is right there in the Puranas, right? So that's first interesting thing to note. Now this is a somewhat less well known version of the Rahu myth. A more well known version of the Rahu myth comes from the Mahabharata, right? And the kind of so called churning of the Milky Ocean myth, right? So this is the myth that most people are familiar with. In this myth, the Asuras and the Devas are working together to churn the primordial Milky Ocean in order to produce the elixir of immortality. Right now, once they create this elixir, the Asuras tend to take it for themselves, right? And then they would be given immortality. But Mohini, who is an enchanted form of Mahavishnu, seduces the Asuras into giving the elixir back to the gods, right? So, as the gods are celebrating and drinking the elixir, Rahu decides to crash this party. Now, Rahu is an Asura, right? So he's one of the quote unquote demons,
He's
right?
supposed to be sleeping with everyone else.
Yeah, yeah. But he pretends to be a god and drinks the elixir, granting him immortality. But as soon as the elixir touches his lips, the sun and the moon immediately reports this, and Vishnu gets very angry and then cuts off Rahu's head. All right. So there is a section I'm going to read that says, here we go. As the gods were drinking the ambrosia which they so desired, a demon named Rahu took the form of a god and began to drink. But when the ambrosia had reached his throat, the sun and the moon reported it, for they wished to help the gods. And the Lord Vishnu took his discus and cut off the well adorned head of that demon who was drinking the ambrosia he had obtained by force. The great head of the demon, which was like a peak of a mountain, fell to the earth, and as it was cut off by the discus, and it shook the earth. The severed head rose up to the sky, roaring terribly, but the headless torso of the demon fell and split open the surface of the earth, causing a tremor throughout the earth with its mountains, forests, and islands. Since then, there has been a deadly enmity between the head of Rahu and the moon and the sun, the immortal head which swallows them up even today. So, when Rahu's head is separated from his body, then Ketu is created, right? So Ketu is the body that falls to the earth and sinks into underneath the earth, right? Whereas Rahu ascends to the heavens, right? And so this is something that you can see with how Rahu and Ketu with the eclipses play out. Whereas, the Rahu force is like this kind of lightning bolt that comes from the sky, this disruption, right? Like the coming down and bringing things into this realm versus Ketu is this like, subterranean explosive force that takes things that are deeply buried and shoots them up to the surface and expels them, right? And so there's this drawing down sense with Rahu and this expelling outward sense with Ketu, right? So
Hi.
go ahead. Hi. Do we have people joining?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hi, everyone. Hi, Sita, Practical Astro, Volpe Kula. Nice to see all you guys. And Sleepy Witch says Rahu battles the divas.
That's one of my favorite stories because it honestly, like, it makes a lot of sense once you start dealing with the nodes and kind of there are like in medieval astrology and in some Hellenistic texts are referred to as the head and tail of the dragon. So there's some like latch over to what they considered these points to be. But like once you really start watching them kind of unleash, like I've never really been able to um, uh, subscribe to them just being chaotic points that don't have mythology and magic and deeply occult, meanings attached to them. They're far more mystical. Anybody who's really paying attention when they get triggered can tell that
Oh
it's not
yeah.
just a completely like random chaotic moment. There's like this very destined feeling every time they get pinged. Like everybody gets that little like being realigned with fate, and you just know it's all real.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, Rahu can be this kind of thing where he kind of throws a wrench into the machine and breaks something, but then you end up adding stuff once you've figured it out, right? Because Rahu is essentially like a trickster deity, right? Like the Norse Loki or the Egyptian Set. He's this being that like throws a wrench into the cosmic order, but never disrupts things for long, right? Like just like he swallows the sun and then the sun basically immediately reemerges. And so he's this force of creation that is like this necessary byproduct of creation, which is the destruction that comes along with it. And so, you know, um, but Rahu is a powerful being, right? Because he is the only Asura to ever drink the elixir of immortality and thus cannot be killed, not even by the Lord of the universe himself, right? So, alone among these Asuras, he was intelligent and crafty enough to resist the charm of Vishnu's female form of Mohini, right? Because Vishnu took the female form of Mohini and seduced all of these angels and demons to give up their elixir, right? Which would have made them immortal. But Rahu was not fooled, right? Rahu did not give it up. And he basically obtains immortality through being a trickster. So, um, I think that is, particularly can speak to sometimes these Rahu eclipses where, um, you end up, um, you end up having events where it's like you gain something through some other kind of destruction, right? Like something else bad happens, but then there's something that comes out of that destruction.
Yeah, it's a karma that takes a long time to ripen. You got to like let it play out because like what looks like disaster in the beginning can be very fortuitous. Like, and I love the trickster sort of reputation because it's deserved, but it's also worth noting like Vishu did promise that the Asuras would get the ambrosia and be immortal so that they would fight against the Devas. And then they changed their mind like at the last moment because they didn't want the Asuras having this much power because they probably couldn't be trusted with it. But like Rahu's tricksterism at that point was kind of reasonable. Like there's a good reason why he had the clarity and sort of the mercurial nature to kind of stand its ground. But it pays very dearly for that because they're always stuck in the sky and opposing points, and the nodes practically without any mythology behind them represent the points that if the sun and the moon hit there, they're going to be in perfect alignment in some sort of pattern with the earth and we're going to have an eclipse. So that is kind of like the mythology behind Rahu swallowing the moon or the sun, depending on which way it's going to go, is the natural phenomena of seeing eclipses happening in the sky and then tracking all the symbolism with what would happen on the ground, like as these eclipses would be rolling around. And I think what's so tempting about the Vedic mythology, and not just that, like Vedic is an unbroken tradition. This is 2,000 years of watching what these points do in in birth charts and transit, how they respond. And it's a really fascinating, I don't know. This is one part where I love Vedic astrology altogether. I'm certainly not trained. I don't offer it in my readings or anything like that, but it's such a rich overlay of everything we do. A lot of the astrology that we do now without even touching any of the stuff coming from India is still very heavily influenced by all of these sort of principles of kind of how the skies operate when they're being run by gods.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that it's interesting that that basically that that what Vishnu says is that because Rahu wants to usurp, right, and rise above his station, and he basically manages to, but then Vishnu, by cutting him down, kind of reestablishes him into the existing order, and is like, okay, yeah, you can screw things up from time to time, but only for the purpose of this like cyclical renewal, where your actions, you know that him swallowing the sun really has little to no lasting consequences, but it is a portent, an omen of things to come. Right. And so, instead of like allowing Rahu what he really wanted, which is, to destabilize the cosmic order, instead, you know, his tricksterism has given us an insight into this cosmic order, because now we can use Rahu's actions in order to kind of prognosticate about whether or not the future is going to be good or bad. Um, so I think it's really interesting to see how the astrological use of Rahu and Ketu is embedded right there in the origin myths. Um, it really means, eclipses are they're one of the primary things I use in readings, right? If there's going to be an eclipse on an important point, especially if they're going to be have Rahu as their Dasa Lord or Helper Lord, then that eclipse is going to really have some effect on their chart, right? So they can be these points of, S.J. Anderson loves to say that they're fated beginnings and endings, and I really like that phrase. I think that's how eclipses play out a lot in natal astrology. I don't know if you've had any experience with that, Emily.
I love eclipses, and SJ read for me a whole bunch of times. So he's a huge influence of mine too. And I know that he could, like, we went through an entire season once of just tracking like my first house eclipses, and they were all so literal because they kept falling on points. And it's very, very, very effective also because, hi, Helen. Um, because they say, like, okay, if I start rambling, let me know, but I love these two. But like, if you really need to make a giant change in your life, like one of the first things that you want to do is change your surroundings, change your circumstances, change your habits, change massive changes can just automatically trigger interior changes from you in ways that like force and conscious will and trying to like force yourself into a very new set of circumstances just by like willing it into existence doesn't really work. And Rahu, when it comes around and it starts to trigger something, kind of like activates this sort of this hunger, right? Like this is like bloodlust almost for whatever planet it's touching, whatever planet is ruling it. If it's Venus, it can be something over art or beauty. But like the North Node kind of ambition gets really like, I don't know, people talk it down and like, don't chase your North Node. You don't want to like go off the like deep end because you can get very like avaricious. It can be something that takes you too far above your station and then you have to come down. But like, I think that it's really overlooked how much like a good, strong Rahu transit, there's that obsession, right? The minimum level obsession to really get you insane and hyper focused on something to give it a chance to become a new talent, a new skill set, a new relationship, whatever new has to be brought in. It puts this kind of like, it glazes your eyes and like locks you into something in such a way that like I don't think any other planet or point has that intensity where it's like you're actually interested in what you're doing almost to the exclusion of anything else once it gets
Yes.
tapped in. And then Ketu in the same way, like Ketu can come around to something that you really, really love and are dearly attached to, and all of a sudden just rob the joy out of it. You just
Oh,
start
yeah.
pulling away before you even like know what's going on because it's making room for something else to come in. There's
Yeah.
no two that work like that have that kind of similarity of like literally churning the birth chart, right? And the
Yeah.
transits just kind of like settle everything else into place. It's really like I really like fuck with the nodes pretty heavily because I just think that from watching them in natal, how they unfold, how they interact with eclipse cycles that are going down. Eclipse cycles can trigger transits in whatever house they're in whatever house they're transiting for you, those events will come out. But then it's always going to be the response of your natal nodes, like your own kind of ambitions and your Ketuvian inherent behaviors that you may or may not be trying to rewrite. It's really like,
Yes.
I don't know. I do think that there's like, I don't know what your feelings are about karma and how well they represent, but I do think there's some very interesting lines that can be traced through them, reading them in that way.
Well, yeah, I like what you said about, Rahu like bringing things in, right? That is the nature of Rahu's to like coalesce and assemble and build, right? And so like a Rahu transit, like Rahu going through your seventh house, a lot of times can bring a lot more people to you for good or bad, right? Um, you know, uh, versus one of the classic Ketu transits is Ketu going over the person's sun, right? And in Vedic astrology, Ketu has like this 13-degree orb of approach. And so once Ketu gets within 13 degrees before it conjuncts the sun, then the Ketu sun transit starts to be activated. And, you see a lot of times with the Ketu sun transit, it's like delusions or betrayals or lies, stuff like that. Um, the last time Ketu went over my son. Actually, the last two times I believe Ketu went over my son, I was involved in stuff like that, right? So, where you think one thing and then it turns out, oh, this has all been a lie, illusory, right? But then you let go of that stuff so that new stuff can come in and fill it. Um,
There's a
yeah.
lot of demoralization that could come with the solid south node transit. And it's worth saying, like, I am definitely probably more of a Pollyanna than most. Like, I'll try and sugarcoat just about anything. Like, yeah, south node is going over your first house stellium and your Pluto, and it's not that bad. We're going to find a way through this. But it really can be, and it's probably like my more like, my peers that are a little bit more strict with that are probably the correct ones, because that would be something, especially over your luminaries. You want to watch out for depression. You want to make sure that you're like prepared. If you are seeing with an astrologer, like you could get into some really low energy states here, and don't end it all. Like just know that there's an end to this, but this is really that purification process when it comes around is super intense. My two favorite Ketu stories in my own life, one was a transit and one was just symbolic. But when Ketu was on my eighth house Neptune, almost exactly is when the GameStop thing happens. And I had an
Oh yeah.
inheritance and I accidentally, but like my very, very first trade ever was in the AMC stock at like the pico top of when it was just about to crash. And I chucked a whole bunch of money that I should not have
Oh
into it and
no.
then just watched it plummet. Like it
Oh
just
no.
absolutely, I made it back like and quite a lot more after that. And that's what kicked me off with financial astrology. So it was one of these things where it's just like this big amount of money that I was just kind of like stymied over because I didn't know if I should I go back to work? Should I do this or whatever? And I was really kind of like, I was actually more stuck with it than being freed with it. You know what I mean? And then Ketu comes along and all of a sudden it's like, well, now you don't have it anymore. And you have to really figure out what happens next quickly. And it set
Yeah.
up this whole new path for me. But then the other one, which is just like, this was my continuous perfected Ketu. Okay. So this wasn't even a transit, but this one blew my mind. When it hit my IC 2 years ago, was to the day we had to move out of our condo that we had been in for like years. And when we moved out of it, and this is a really amazing like complex that was, loved. We thought that they were going to be renting them all out. They demoed them. They actually
Oh
scrubbed
no.
the entire complex. Like it's not there anymore. It's an empty lot. It was just like even the symbolism of Ketu hitting my IC in that point ended up with this complete like disaster zone. It's not there anymore. It does not exist. Like the finality, that is kind of like Ketu hasn't really done its work until something is like evaporated, until
Yeah.
it's just like etherized, until there's like nothing left in its wake.
Yeah. And but Ketu can have some good kind of influences as well, right? Like you mentioned the first house transit. A lot of times Ketu going through the first house can have people purging things that are no longer good for them, like getting rid of like old bad habits, addictions, things like that. I've seen that a lot with Ketu going through the first, and so a lot of times Ketu, like just like it can take away things that you might like to have, like money. It can also take away things that are bad, right? It can take away it can expel and purge all like the toxic and overgrown and like not no longer useful energy that has been trapped within you, right? And these kind of things. And Ketu can have this like purifying quality to it, which is very spiritual to an extent, right? And of the two nodes, Ketu is the more kind of spiritualized node, right? Whereas Rahu is the more material, earthly influence.
And it's funny because when you were talking about Sun Ketu too, like natally, that combination is huge in long term meditators. I cannot even tell you how many people I've seen with that have like gone to really weird places with their consciousness. Some make it back, some don't. But it's kind of like this ability when Ketu's touching a planet. Jupiter Ketu is another big one. Ketu midheaven, seeing it in a lot of like spiritual teachers and like really profound yogis. Like that is a pretty like, and maybe it's because you have to deal with so much loss, or you do deal with kind of like more depersonalization around that planet that like triggers this kind of unseen um getting comfortable with the
Yeah.
cadent worlds, right? Like the cadent realms of what is not visible. And yeah, it's not
Yeah.
as binary. You're totally right about that, because it can be very easy to be like Rahu good, Ketu bad, and that's not always the way of it. And they don't
Yeah.
separate very easily either. Like they do need to work off of each other.
I mean, if anything, I feel like Ketu is probably the less detrimental on average. I know that might be a minority opinion, but
I
uh,
don't think so. I mean, like sitting down and meditating versus trying like a grand world takeover, or getting yourself into some crazy like the Rahuvian ideas that can come around can really lead
yeah,
you to some crazy places.
yeah. Rahu can, at its worst, can be, like a dope fiend who's, willing to just like rip anyone off for like another crack rock, right? So, it can, there can, the endless hunger of Rahu at its worst form can, just kind of
Force
eat
you back
people
to Ketu.
alive. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You go hungry ghost and then you get back to your meditation mat. Like it's just this constant, you go too far in the one or the other. I don't know if you've read The Lunar Nodes Redemption and Crisis, I want to say, by Camilla Sutton.
I have
But
not.
she's like, I'm going to send you like a copy and see if you like some of it. But she's got a really beautiful take on a lot of these. But one of the things she says about Rahu, which is so true, is that it stirs the libido and the life force to such a pitch that it can pull you out of Ketu's wallowing. If you do get
Mhm.
stuck, like if you are in a 2-year funk over an ex, like Ketu is somewhere involved in that. That's kind of like the part of you that isn't able to move past like the past and these memories that become very fuzzy and comfortable and false. It's Rahu that is able to stir something in you that's strong enough to get you to take a step in another direction just so you can align with new karma and new fate. And then when you go too far and you lose your head and you are completely like out on a limb that you can't get back from, it's Ketu that pulls you back to something that's more familiar and keeps you like, within your ancestral line and working within the principles of why you're supposed to be here, what you
Yeah.
have left to do.
I think what you have to say serves as a good catalyst for the next part of the show, where I was going to show some example charts of how
I
Rahu
can't wait
and
to see
Ketu are
these.
working. But before we move on, I just wanted to note that the source I was reading from about the Rahu myths is um, a PhD dissertation entitled "The Raven and the Serpent: Demonic Buddhism in India and Tibet" by Cameron Bailey. This is a very interesting document and has a great overview of the different types of myths of Rahu and Ketu and other related myths in Buddhism and Hinduism. My a friend of mine, Jin the Ninja at Wukong Reborn, he has a show called Threshold Saints, which I've appeared on. He's the one that turned me on to this document, and it's really interesting. So shout out to him for sending this my way. Uh, now let's just go briefly and look at some of these charts, right? So here we go, right? Now this is Astro Live, right? So I am. Here, let me change the layout of how this is
You
looking.
always have the best examples. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yeah, so here we go. Well, so because this is Astro Live and people are going to be calling in soon to share, their charts publicly and stories from their personal life. I thought it's not fair if I'm not also willing to do the same thing. So I'm gonna first start with some examples from my chart in my own life. So here, let's get this displayed with the transits. All right. So, because we want to go back in time, right? And so I've noticed that, even this is one of the most basic things you can do with the nodes, right? Is you can look at the nodal returns and the nodal reversals, right? So we're just going to go back and look at all the ones I've had, right? So we go back. The first one is going to be here. The first nodal reversal that I get is here in October of 1999, right? And the what happened around this time period was that my parents bought a piano, right? And I started to learn how to play the piano, and I started actually in it was October of 1999 when I first began piano lessons, and music has been a passion that I have had my whole life, and it's one of the three a few big things that has always kind of kept me going. And this was also around the time I was 9 years old at this time, and I was first starting to. I had younger brothers and sisters, right, and so I had to take care of them and do a lot of chores and stuff. And so my parents started giving me an allowance. And what I did was I started saving up the allowance money to go and buy CDs. And this was the first time that I was getting exposed to music other than what my parents had been playing, right? And I remember going out and buying CDs after around this time. I think 1999 was the first year I ever did that. So I thought that was interesting because then if I go forward another few years to the nodal return, the first nodal return, which happens here. Sorry, going back. This happens in yeah February 2009. All right. Now something interesting here. So this is my first nodal return, and because I was actually delayed a year in school, and so I was still in high school at this point, even though I was 18 years old at this point. And interesting thing that happened around this time, I actually recently found the uh, the date that this happened, which it happened actually a couple of days before this. So it was here. It was like February, somewhere around in here, early February, right before Valentine's Day. I This was the first time I ever got exposed to astrology. Um, and it's kind of a funny story. I was in school suspension for skipping class, right? And there was a girl also there, right? And she had this book that I'd never seen anything like it. It had all these columns of numbers and strange symbols. I didn't know what it was, right? And you're not allowed to talk to anyone else in school suspension except during lunch. And so then during lunch, I had to go talk to her, had to find out what this was. And it turns out it was an ephemeris. And she ends up casting my chart right there, in the in school suspension. That was the first time I ever saw my astrology chart, which has been another thing that stayed with me through my whole life, right? Where it's been a theme that's come back around ever since this time, and I think it's interesting. It's the node of return, and we talked about how um, Ketu can like, remove things, but then also give a gift, right? And so it's here, it's like my freedom is like literally being removed because I'm in detention, right? Can't do the normal stuff, but I get something else comes in, right? And it's this, kind of first exposure to astrology, which at the time I had no idea would become such a big thing in my life going forward, right? And then last example I have from my own personal life is around the nodal reversal, right? So that is coming up. Whoops, went too far. That would be here, approximately. Yeah. Oh, wait. I've gone way too far. This is my nodal return. That hasn't happened yet. Whoops.
We could take guesses.
Yeah, what do you think it's going to be? Well, let me show you what the first one was
I
first.
love that you have a ninth house Ketu, especially with your. Yeah, this is really beautiful. I didn't know that you were a North Node Saturn baby too, because so am I. I have it fifth house, um, that's a very unique signature of how it plays us. But that's actually very common in a lot of occultists I've seen. We get drawn towards spooky structures and kind of thrive within them. But I love your ninth house south node, and especially
Yeah,
with
it's
exalted Jupiter, because you can see that a lot, like a real ease, right? Like something very instinctual with the astrology
yeah.
that you deal with, and spending a lot on the actual mechanics of it, and the data, and bringing it back to like you actually can track this. Like you're always keeping us on out of all the woo and just the vibes, and just kind of like, no, we're going to figure this out as a team. Everybody
Yeah.
vote.
Yeah, no, I always love to put it to the test and to try and find the correlations. And Rahu or Ketu here is exactly conjunct my midheaven. My midheaven's at 10 degrees, 3 minutes Leo, and Ketu's here just barely at the ninth, it at 9 degrees, 14 minutes. So the last, nodal return or reversal I had was here. This one in May 2018, May 7th, 2018, and this was the week I graduated from law school. All right, and so yet another start of something that has become, significant, throughout my life going forward. Right, so. Um, I don't know. I thought that was a kind of an interesting thing to share that the starting point for these three things that have kind of become really the three things I spend a lot the most time on in my life, right? And people know about me. That can all be tied back to these nodal returns and reversals. So, it's not always bad, this Rahu Ketu stuff. Sometimes it can bring you the stuff that you really need to go forward with your life, and it can bring up these deeply buried karmas, right? And yeah, karma is not always great, but sometimes karma is good too. um
It's
yeah.
also they're your best chance to like do something with it when the nodes are activated. If you do subscribe to karma and you do kind of pay attention to, samskars and the stuff that's lingering and can't be changed, which I absolutely, whether or not you call it karma, whether you call it epigenetics, like we come here with certain mannerisms, whether they're like from our ancestry or whatever. Everybody is born with certain things that just kind of exist to them before nurture has a chance to do anything with it, just inherent nature. And that's all very Ketuvian. And some of it comes out with Rahu. But these are the times where you really kind of get to meet like what you're made of, that nobody can kind of explain why. Like the tendencies that you have that come from something other than, my mother taught me this, or like nobody taught you astrology, but you clearly have like just a resonance with it to be able to do something. And I told you about the South Node midheaven. I feel like that like totally proves my point. I
Yeah.
think it's one of the best placements too, because when I see it, especially, I know like a really powerful yogi that has it, and a couple of other other spiritual people that I like more than I like most. And part of that is because they're very honest and they don't care about being seen as spiritual. And on top of that, midheaven, I think Ketu works really, really well because there's an honesty and a detachment from how it's perceived. And so you don't end up with as much spiritual inflation as other people can fall into when you get into like the mystic life, the working mystic or whatever, and get
Yeah.
carried away in all this goddess play and everything else.
Yeah, no, I like you saying that. It is something that I have felt like I feel like my south node on the midheaven for me, the experience has been I'm really comfortable being seen or like I don't really care what other people think. Like if I put something out there, I'm not gonna be like worried about getting like bad reactions or whatever. I'm just like comfortable, I guess, with people looking at me and it's like, well, like, the way I see it, it's like, all right, dude, you're the one looking at me, right? So if I suck, like, what does that say about you, right? um, and I also do get uncomfortable when people, kind of might put me on a pedestal or say I'm some great spiritual teacher or something. I feel uncomfortable with that. I'm just a guy trying to figure things out, and help other people as best I can. I'm
Which
not.
is really, yes, and that's how it should be, like this yeoman magus, right? Like this, like traveling the world, just like doing magic for the sake of doing magic. And it's just a very honest look into what this kind of like into what that life looks like, right? Really interfacing between the seen and the unseen without the subterfuge that can so easily come, if it's in the hands of a Venusian like me, or like just the layers of just kind of like enchantment that can kind of pile on things too quickly. It cuts through a lot of that. And I've just always loved the nature because it's also kind of like, it's not an unpowerful position to know how to do magic and to be a charismatic person that can tell the future and really have a lot of power over perception and draw in. And so it's kind of one of those things where ideally you want that to go to somebody who doesn't really care and doesn't want it in the first place, like that sort of reluctant kind of role of just like it is what it is, either however that works. It's a much more honest interpretation. And I think I think Osho had it too. I can't remember. Well, Osho's a very bad example. Maybe he was Rahu, but we're not gonna go down that path.
Yeah. Victory, hey, how you doing in chat, man? He asked, what is the name of the book? It's The Raven and the Serpent by Cameron Bailey as a PhD thesis. So just in case you're wondering about that. Um, yeah, so I thank you for saying all that, Emily. You're way too kind to me. I do not deserve such praise, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Um, so let's move on from my chart because I got a couple other examples, right? All right, so here, let's do this. All right, so in the inner wheel here we have L. Ron Hubbard's chart, right? So everyone knows L. Ron Hubbard, fascinating individual to say the least. Um, his chart is fucking crazy in my opinion. I mean, look at this like grand water trine that he's going on. Ketu, Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, Pallas, Neptune, Lot of Fortune, all trine.
Another
This
Saturn
grand
North
water
Node.
trine.
This is like Jupiter, Ketu, and Saturn North Node are like you just see them so often in anybody who is dealing with these. This is a beautiful chart, Alex.
Yeah, so let's go back and look at because there's a story about L. Ron Hubbard, right? And L. Ron Hubbard, back when he was a science fiction writer, right? Um, he had he'd had this idea that to start a religion, right? But he couldn't really come up with any ideas, right? And then um, oh, it's way back before this. This is the second one. Here we go. Sorry. Where is it? Uh, Here we go. All right. So we stick this forward. We're in the year 1948, right? So it is in late 1948 that L. Ron Hubbard takes second half of 1948. He takes a job at a psychiatric hospital, right? Like back then, they're, insane asylums, right? And this specific one was people that had been committed there by the state, right? And so they could not leave, right? And L. Ron Hubbard observed one of his superiors soliciting a bribe from a woman in order to secure her husband's release from this state ordered psychiatric facility, right? Which he later wrote about in his diary and correspondence as being like, this kind of aha moment for him. And then this is when we get the first mentions in his private correspondence with his friends about ideas that would eventually become Dianetics, right? And he's born in 1911, right? And this is 1948, so this is his first nodal return when he is 36, 37 years old. And uh, boom, we get the birth of Dianetics, which is, you know, which gave birth to Scientology, and that's what he really became known for his whole life. I mean, yeah, people know him for his science fiction books, but let's be real, the science fiction books are pretty terrible. Robert Heinlein did way better than L. Ron Hubbard, and they were kind of competing against each other. But I mean, has anyone read Battlefield Earth? Have anyone actually made it through that book? I don't know. I couldn't. I couldn't even make it past the first few pages. But I think it's interesting to see here in his chart how he gets this refresh of the nodes, and then boom, it's his natal promise comes to the fore.
This is so beautiful too with the Jupiter action on his ascendant and Chiron on, like, there's just so many different keys that kind of come in. And I love when the outer planets kind of make an appearance too, because you know that it's going to be something above the individual, right? Like
Yeah.
when there's a personal planet that's kind of like lining up with a lot of outer planet activity and nodal, there's a very good chance that it's going to hit the collective some way, somehow. It's not just going to be an interior matter, like a
Yeah.
family private skeletons in the closet deal. Like this is going to go full broadcast.
Well, yeah, because a couple days later, he had this. A few days later, he had Venus retrograding over Uranus, conjunct his natal Pluto and descendant. So it's like unusual creation has plutonic effect on the other people in the world. His seventh house, right? It's kind of like, how much more.
I
I
know,
know
right? Like
Pluto
the
is
Pluto
daunting.
especially is going to be like, this one is going to come back to haunt everybody. Like
Yeah.
in the inception of it all, like that's kind of saying like where this is going to end up at some point is going to be dark and canon.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought, Elron, I used his chart as an example for a few different teaching things on Twitter, and I always love to come back to his chart anytime I can to demonstrate it because I just think it's really good. All right, now the last example I have here is of someone this guy is a criminal, right? However, he's very good being a criminal, and he hardly ever gets busted, even though he has done absolutely heinous things. He doesn't ever seem to go to jail, except when he has the nodal returns and reversals. So this was when he went to jail. Uh, uh, I think, yeah, he got arrested
Oh,
around
this is a fair
here,
one.
and it was actually a couple of weeks after this. It was September. Yeah, it was here. So just a few weeks after he'd had his nodal return, he gets arrested and ends up spending a significant period of time in jail. Now, because he's got Jupiter trining his sun and his Venus, right? He is lucky, right? And even when he gets busted, he ends up getting a better deal where he only has to, he could have spent decades in prison. He only spends like 2 or 3 years, right? So, but yeah, that's and then before that, the only other time he had been to prison was um, back here when the nodes were here in conjunct his. He had his nodal reversal. He actually spent more time in jail around this time period, which would have been in yeah, 2011, um,
It's
2012
so
time period.
literal. I don't like to do the whole, I mean, like, I don't like to simplify, massive systems of karma or anything like that, even though they're very easy to throw around with the nodes. But this does definitely look like a very good example of karma coming due when the nodes make contact with their natal positions.
Well, yeah, and this is not to say, that that getting your nodal returns and nodal reversals means that you're going to be arrested, right? But taking into the consideration the first two examples where these nodal reversals and returns were periods in life where the person's natal promise or the main things that like the person is involved with kind of come to the fore. Like with L. Ron Hubbard, it was getting his idea for Scientology, right? This guy is, basically career criminal and just does all different kinds of stuff, right? You name it, right? And so it would make sense that what are criminals known for more than anything else? Going to prison, right? So it would make sense that that would be a theme that would pop up around these nodal activations because it just brings out the underlying nature that's embedded in the chart. It's like eclipses and nodal transits are time periods where these kind of deeply buried karmas are brought to the surface and manifest. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I think that these are all really interesting examples. And um, one other thing I wanted to say about this chart is just uh, that even though the nodes are in Gemini and Sagittarius, this person was actually born on a full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio, conjunct these all three malefics: Pluto, Saturn, and Mars. Which, I don't know. That seems it doesn't seem good, does it?
It's really like sometimes you see stuff like this, and it's just a very good reminder that sometimes you do just have to call a spade a spade. Like, this is a chart that's exactly what it looks like. We don't want to talk about like Scorpio full moon. Like, that was a tough full moon. That's a tough, like,
Yeah.
because
Not
Mars
only is
on
it
the.
a full moon, it's an eclipse, and
Mhm.
it's conjunct Pluto, Saturn, and Mars.
Those are always the ones, because there were definitely a couple of those days last year where all of us were kind of like, I wonder what the babies being born today are going to be like. Like, they can't all be evil, but some of them are going to have some real wild lives. Um, yeah, when that crazy, but it can always, like, it can go both ways. It's so hard to just kind of like look and see. Like, I love it when a person is really living up to their natal promise in the best and like most robust and just, you know, straightforward ways that you can. But it's always worth saying that, like, the stars are the stars, and then there's always like what you do with them. There can be such tremendous variations in how people tend to like respond and how they channel those really heavy expressions of that much malefica attached to nodal activations and everything else. People can
Yeah,
surprise you.
yeah. And there's always a choice, right? I mean, for this person in particular, at both of these times, he had been on the reason why he ended up going to prison is because he had been on like probation or home detention or something and ended up violating it, right? And so it's like, he didn't have to go to prison, but he did because he can't help himself, right? But he could have backed off of the crazy unhinged stuff for a few months and served out his probation for a few years, but no, I mean that's just I mean, well, look at this moon here. This moon does not seem like it's going to be able to be making some great decisions under pressure, right? I don't know.
Mars Saturn together. I
And
mean,
both retrograde too.
yeah. I mean, that seems even more like for a talented criminal. Like if you're good at it, you're good at it. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like I could see where the reluctancy to build any other skill sets would come from if it's just too easy. And that's kind of the whole point with Ketu, right? Like in the first, it's too easy. It's too easy to break out of these grooves that are just kind of in you for who knows what reason. And you just kind of settle back into these habits that kind of pull you down and eventually into the circumstances. Like Ketu pulls you down into your nature and Rahu tries to shoot you above your station. Either which way, they're both trying to take you out of like the plane, right? Like the field of play and into something a little bit more nebulous.
Yeah. So I agree with that. I agree with that. I think that's a great way to sum it up. And I just posted the link to the stream so that people can join. It's on the Twitter. So if you guys want to go there and join up with us, we are now taking callers. I can also post the link in the chat. Um, so if you guys want to join, um, we are now accepting callers. So, is anyone, if first person to join, first come, first serve. While we're doing that, I'm going to just take a brief aside and go get another soda because I'm thirsty. But maybe Emily can keep you guys company while I'm gone for just a few minutes.
Okay, let me read through some comments here. Hi, guys. I don't know if somebody asked about the book for the nodes, but the one that I was talking about is Camilla Sutton. The Lunar Nodes, I think it's the Lunar Nodes Crisis and Redemption. And it is a Vedic astrology book, but it is really, really, really digestible and speaks a lot to, has every section that you could imagine, like what a nodal transit looks like, um, from a Vedic perspective, nakshatras, all of that. It's just really beautifully written. Moon, Mars, Saturn, Scorpio, Stellium, who acted in a really hurtful way. So I'm listening with the truth. Mars and Saturn are really tough, man. They're really, really, really tough. It's very hard to, it's going to go one of two ways. And sometimes it can just, depending on how it gets activated, it can show like a lot of terrible childhood stuff that just kind of set people into a way where it's either going to, you have to overcome and you have to decide to integrate it and not become the monster, or it can really be a big sign of just antisocial stuff that's going to come through. Like you never look at a Mars Saturn tight conjunction or anything else in a chart without asking questions. Like, how does this look for you? How is this played out? Like, let's talk. How was your childhood? How's your relationship with your dad? Because there's normally going to be something that has to like come up and place a lot of context into the person that they became. Not everybody gets an easy launch pad, as a childhood to come from. But I'm sorry that they behaved like that.
Are we talking about Mars and Saturn conjunctions?
Yeah, we're talking
Yeah.
about when people go, they also make like, I don't know though, but when Mars and Saturn go right together, they're just extraordinarily like capable. I
Yeah.
mean, like it's some of the best friends that you'll ever have because they can show up for this stuff that other people can kind of like, more surface level people will just bounce. And you can
Yeah.
have somebody who's like really going to see you through the most massive processes of your life. Like one of my friends has a Mars Saturn conjunction in her first house, and she's really like had a life to show for it. But when another one of our girlfriends lost her mom, she was there with her for months settling the estate, going through every single piece of it, which is like indefatigable, just would not tire and wouldn't leave her alone with that. And that's not necessarily like a benefic trait, not that we're not helpful, but like with that kind of patience. David Lynch, yes,
Yes.
exactly.
I was just about to say David Lynch has a Mars Saturn conjunction. I recently posted on Twitter a chart of a client of mine that is a trauma surgery nurse, and she has Mars Saturn conjunct on the ascendant in Cancer, and so she is like she's there when people come in when they've had like horrible car accidents and their blood everywhere and they're about to die and they have to go to emergency trauma surgery. She's the one that deals with that kind of stuff, right? So that's the kind of grit that comes with a Mars Saturn conjunction. Also, I've seen it. I've got a example of a chart here. This person. Oh, like, am I still sharing? No, I'm not.
Mars, Saturn.
Let me turn
Yeah,
my.
see, our Krista, like that's right there. Like
Yeah. So
we
this
wouldn't have
person.
practical Astros without the love child of Mars and Saturn. So we have to be careful with the slander here.
No, yeah, a lot of it depends on the house that it's in, right? 'Cause here, this is all in the 11th house, and Mars and Saturn in a good house can have good effects, right? Like especially Mars and Saturn in the 11th house. These people have very wide social networks. A lot, I
That's
feel,
Krista. Like, not
yeah.
to embarrass her or brag on her, but like, I have a heavy, selfish fifth house presence. And like Krista from Practical Astros, if any of you know her, is very, very, very active in every community. If there's a disaster zone, she's one of the first people to she's one of the first people to be able to show up with a really consistent effort to be able to help in situations that a lot of people would very reasonably like shut down with trauma or just not be able to kind of like stay open to the level of unease and disaster going around, which she manages to make a way through so that everybody can have some peace. And very like, we love her dearly. She's a very important part of our community.
Oh yeah, love Practical Astros. Shout out to her. She says, "Slander away, the malefics love it."
They don't want our praise.
No, no, they don't. Saturn is the enemy, right? Saturn would be more happy if you flipped him the bird than if you, was like, "Oh, please, Daddy Saturn," right? And, um, so let's see. I don't think we have anyone that has called in yet. Guy, I did post it to Twitter, so if you guys and in the chat, so if you guys want to come and get your chart read by us, that would be awesome. I guess we can, if someone wants to post their chart in the chat, we can also do one like that.
If you need to bury a body, call them Mars Saturn conjunction. Yes. And if they have Mars Saturn in Aries, all the better. That is like, that's someone who can keep the secret, who probably won't care for very long and is definitely good with enough light criming to not have any judgment and just show up for whatever is necessary and required. Hi, Plutonic Planes.
Hey guys, how are you guys doing? Tria Kappa was sharing a story saying that I knew someone with a gnarly Mars, Moon, Saturn in Scorpio stellium who acted in a really hurtful way, so I'm listening with fascination. Um, it resonates with the way they acted. The person had a neglectful mother, from what I could gather, so they have my sympathy for that at least. We both had, okay, yeah, so the mother thing, yeah, Scorpio moons and the mom. I mean, that's a very common trope, and it seems to be one that is true. They are either kind of neglectful, distant mothers, or they are the overly attached mom that, like, basically puts the male child in a, like, surrogate husband role when he's a
The
teenager.
devouring mom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, those are the kind of two main things you see a lot with Scorpio moons, especially when that moon is like conjunct Pluto or Saturn too, right?
Rachel wants her chart read.
Okay. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, post it in the chat or you can join the stream link. I can post that in the thing here and you can join. You don't have to turn your camera on if you don't want to. Has she posted anything? Oh, okay. Someone says mine has a Saturn Mars conjunction Aquarius if you need an example. All right. Uh oh, okay. Well, this person she's responded. She wants an actual reading. So let's put her up. Um all right. Um Emily, do you think you could read out that person's birth information for me?
February 15th, 1995, 9:11 a.m. EST, Toronto, Canada.
Okay. All right. Here we are. Here's the chart. Does this look? Hopefully, this looks right. Let's turn the chat back on so we can see. Okay. All right. So this person has the nodes. Since we're doing the nodes, let's look at them first. So, you've got the nodes in the second or in the eighth, right? So one thing I think that's interesting to do with the nodes um, is to look. You can kind of determine which node is going to be dominant in the person's life because usually one node has a bigger influence and the other one doesn't. Right. So one way I like to determine it is if we look at what house, uh, using the body parts of the houses, right, where the affliction would be, right? So um, this says it would be second house. Yes. So that would be shoulder, teeth, throat, facial bones, nose, nails, right eye, and voice. So afflictions involving those types of things. So face, health problems concerning the face, the speech, stuff like that. Also, perhaps stomach or heart related problems. Now, up here in the eighth house, that would be the pelvic area, external sexual organs, um, and also things like surgeries and other things like that could be indicated by a strong node in the eighth house. So I'm wondering if the person, Rachel, if you have had, if either one of those parts of your body seem to be weaker or more substitute to afflictions or problems happening, because that would tell us which node of yours is going to be the stronger one. Let's see if I can guess. So the moon is at the bending of the nodes, and it's applying towards Rahu, but
Also conjunct Rahu's ruler.
yeah, it's also yeah, it is, and it's also square Lilith, so it's gonna be at that schism point, the moon wobble. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking maybe South Node might take it here, and that they may have more problems with the face and voice area. But we'll see. Versus like the pelvic hip region. Uh, but let's see if they will respond. Hopefully, if and while we're waiting on them, if you see anything in this chart you'd like to point out, Emily, just go right ahead.
Yeah, I like the second house south node is always a tricky one, like for sure, because it's, that's how you support yourself, it's how you earn. And you have the south node's ruler, joint problems feel like a raggedy, and I'm only pushing 30. Maybe it's north
Okay.
node.
So yeah, if that is the case, because um, yeah, it says yeah, I would say that joints would more likely to be eighth, ninth house stuff, right? Because the joints and that kind of stuff is like, eighth, ninth. So I would say, yeah, maybe Rahu is the dominant one, which makes sense since the moon is gonna, that's the next node the moon is gonna hit is Rahu. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I It's interesting that you have the second house south node, which, traditionally, without getting very hips and knees to,
Ah, yes. So it definitely is
It's
the north node that is dominant. Yeah.
um with Venus, the second house rulers, this your south node's ruler conjunct your midheaven. I'm wondering about like career and income and how well those go together. Do you make good money off what you like to do or what you're most known for? Or is it kind of detached from that, working on something closer to commission or investment type stuff? Do you have like, with the fifth house, Mars ruling the eighth house as well, and in Leo, no less, it kind of, you've got a couple of things pointing to a creative here. Do you have a side gig or are you pretty comfortable earning from what you do?
And while they are answering that question, since we're on chat, I know we've had a couple people join. Thanks for joining. We will get to you guys soon. There's also, I would also just say about the North Node and South Node in the second and the eighth. I see a lot of astrologers with this, with the nodes in this axis. Can give a kind of analytical bent to people, people that like to dig into stuff. So, nodes in the second and the eighth, I've seen a lot be associated with astrologers. So that's just a something to keep in mind. Um, I also think that there could be something creative going on, um, Emily, especially because, um, well, I mean, they've got this Mercury stationing direct here, and it's it's on the angles of the moon and the sun. So I feel like expression. This person's got a lot to on their mind, a lot to express. She says, I've been pretty lucky career wise. Lots of people helping me to find work over the years. I work in media. I'm a musician too, but I don't make money from that. Um, that's interesting.
Yeah, that does sound like a very strong eighth house, for having the outside resources and the people contributing to your success and well-being. And also Venus on the midheaven is a very popular, like that's a very easy to recommend placement. And in Capricorn, it's even got this, like, I love a Saturn ruled Venus. I'm very biased in this regard, but there's a trustworthiness. You don't want to put your name all over everybody. And this chart has like a very good um, immediate reputation, I would say, as far as people think well of you and speak well of your name in closed rooms that you're not privy to. So that makes a lot of sense. But having the extra like fifth house kind of musician uh, position where maybe you don't even want to monetize it, and turn everything into an income stream and just be able to have a lot of like creative freedom and something where you can just play and be able to express and put together whatever that artistic vision looks like without having to worry about musical schedules and doing all of the other stuff that would turn it into a primary source of income, because that's a very common second house south node situation too, where not everything is interesting once it's monetized. Not everything has to be turned into a capitalist grind. Some things should be allowed to be art for art's sake.
I hear to that. I totally agree. That's why we're doing this free live stream for everybody, right?
Yes, for the love of the game, for fun.
Yes. Yeah, and it does not surprise me the person works in media, given the strong Jupiter in the ninth and the strong Mercury here. They can see each other. And also, though, this person does have this Mars opposite the Sun, Mars retrograde here. And, I mean, it's just like one of those stereotypical placements where people with a retrograde Mars, especially when it's opposite the Sun, there's all of this indecision and not knowing what way to act, and then like as soon as you try and act, then you're like, what, why did I do that, kind of thing. Oh, like so I imagine, and it's conjunct the moon, so I imagine you might feel quite anxious about it and maybe torture yourself over faux pas or mistakes or things that you felt like you didn't execute properly. I don't know, this Mars seems like it could be kind of anxious.
Yeah. Mars and Moon are tricky like that. I totally see that sort of a creative confidence that needs a lot of like room to sort of go back and forth. And Mars retrograde is a Mars turned inward as well. Like
Yeah.
it's much harsher on the native than it can be outwardly projected a lot of times. So that's definitely, and Moon is mind and emotion. Those two
Mm.
together can be very, they're tough bosses for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. If Mars was direct, it might give them a very strong force of will and ability to dominate other people. But
Could
here,
make them an asshole too. Like you
yeah,
can, Mars and Moon can go a lot of ways when they're
but
direct.
here, yeah, because it's retrograde, I feel like it's going to be more of a hesitancy that's going to be brought out by that. Um, you know. All right. So we've got a couple of callers that have called in. Thank you, Rachel Gow. Thank you for letting us do your charts. But
Full moon baby.
yeah, since we got a couple of callers here, I'm going to turn on the first one that called in. D, hey, welcome to the show, man. How you doing? Or I guess I only have one letter,
Not
so
denying that.
can't assume that. What's up? You're on, D. Hello. We cannot hear you. Okay. We'll come back to D. Angel E, welcome to Astro Live. How are you doing?
Hi, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. How's it going?
Hi, Angel.
Um, Hi guys. Sorry. It's going well. It's going well. Thank you for asking. How about you guys? You guys are doing fantastic.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
we're
we get to
doing
be here with
good.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just popping in. I just stopped and I've seen that you guys were doing this and interested in learning more about what you guys have got to say, and I was curious if you could look at my chart and tell me what you think about it.
Yeah, what is your birth information?
So, I was born June 10th, 1993 at 2 p.m. in a city called Worthington, Minnesota.
All right. Looks like it's got that. Okay. This look like your charts here?
Do we have Virgo rising? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Ooh, another moon malefic baby.
Yeah,
You
the
don't
moon
say.
is conjunct Saturn, which is stationing here. Um, so yeah, Saturn is stationing retrograde here. Um, and the moon is just past it. Now the moon is um, because Firmicus Maternus says that when it's a moon that's past it's below the quarter phase, right? So it's like less than half full of light, and it's advancing towards the angles of Saturn, then that will give a kind of unstable or difficult childhood. However, here, the moon is already separating from Saturn, right? And it is not quite to the waning quarter phase yet. So this does not quite fit Firmicus Maternus's definition. So I'm wondering if that may have manifested more as a kind of emotional closed offness rather than the childhood really being harmed, but maybe there is a um, kind of residence to like perhaps a sense of mental alienation or separateness, like a feeling hard to connect with other people or feeling kind of isolated in that sense. Does any of that resonate, Angel?
Well, yeah, quite a bit actually. And I would actually say that, growing up, I didn't necessarily look at my childhood as a hard childhood, but I didn't really recognize the events or things that were happening. But growing up and processing all that, I would consider it a rough childhood. Um, for instance, I was raised in Mexico. Father was in the United States. Father had been arrested for illegal papers, not comfortable saying that, but kind of grew up without my father figure for a while. Moved around a lot as a child. Finally, kind of like stationed at one place in sixth grade, and I had moved like 10 times by then. Um, Super strict mother, and now it's all good and great now, but also just I think all that moving definitely took in that whole like, well, I'm not going to connect with anybody because everybody that I've ever connected with, I moved away from.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I would say I really started branching myself out and breaking down these walls a lot towards like my 28th birthday. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, been getting to that since then.
Interesting.
That's
Um,
that's so appropriate for a fourth house north node too.
yeah.
Especially Virgo risings, of course, have like the Sagittarius fourth house, which can be tricky. You know, Sagittarius likes to roam. It's a very expansive sign for a place where typically speaking, you want to like consolidate. You want a home base that stays strong, that can serve well, maybe that is too traditionally speaking. But in your case, like it becomes this really interesting calling because Rahu is a stranger in a strange land, right? Like to really think about what it takes, like as you're describing now, this journey that's starting up with you finally learning how to establish roots in your relationships and in your friendships and what that looks like as far as now that you can make choices about where you decide to stay and who you decide to invest that energy in and what your home base looks like. It's very new because that's not what you had coming from the childhood. And in some cases, the strict mother with the moon Saturn conjunction tracks 1000%, especially one that's, you know, very protective and doing the best that can be done or thinks that, and may have been, you know, especially in tumultuous circumstances like that, making sure that you don't get too far from the center in a time when it could be chaotic and you could get really swept away, right? But having to kind of like break away from that interpretation too of a childhood home that has sort of a strictness and a coldness and a necessity to it because your fourth house with Sagittarius and your Jupiter being in this lovely Libra Jupiter, like you're kind of, this chart looks like it's needs a warmer environment than you may be used to and how to create that for yourself and the people that you love and end up making your own family with. Um, does any of that sound right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that I've kind of like I've said, I've tried to break down, what I've been going through and expand more. For instance, I just started dancing my 30th year, like first time I started dancing, and like techno music, I've been getting really into that. But for so long, I've just kind of like I was surrounded by more so the mentality of like, hustle hard, grind hard. Uh, you're not gonna get it, handed out to you. I've worked a lot of jobs where I worked a lot of overtime. 27th birthday, 27th to 29th, I worked at the oil fields. I was a frac hand working
Wow.
115 hours a week. Um, and that was just my mentality. And, I was just like, kind of like you guys have mentioned, just a distant person. I've appreciated a lot of art, a lot of music. I've only dated artists, um, which is funny to me, but
That's
when it
beautiful
comes,
with your ninth house Venus, you know, conjunct your lot of arrows. That's a very like healing archetype for you, right? Brings in a lot of energy and charge that helps you to grow in new directions.
oh, definitely, they have definitely helped me branch out and I have appreciation for the people I've had in my life so much. But I suppose, like, I've thought about the Jupiter aspect and it being in Libra because I'm not the best expressive person. And it's hard for me to find the route to be expressive. And, I'm just like one of those people that has a hand in so many things but hasn't dedicated to anything. And I've always told myself, you just dedicate to something, you're gonna be great.
Yeah.
Career wise, it's been super hard lately, which is kind of frustrating for me because I've always had jobs land on my lap. And as of late, I'm just like, damn, I can't even find the money to go enjoy my life, which is confusing to me, but you go with it.
Well,
Yeah, Pluto just
yeah.
moving into your sixth house, and also you've got Jupiter like in a very weird condition right now, moving all up and down your 10th house. South Node and Sun and lot of fortune that's up there. So that definitely, there's a lot of things pointing to that. And as far as being a very weird market, but in this time of like, it's interesting because Jupiter and South Node making contact with the natal placement is kind of like removing something that you need. You do need to earn a livelihood for yourself, of course, but also having some space and some empty canvas, right? To have to spend some time with your own, with yourself and the people that you care about. And like, you can't go out and you can't do as many things, but this is a very valuable chance to kind of reconnect to other places that you may not have be able to get to, especially with the way that you work, like, and how dedicated you are in these really overwhelming and kind of very consuming jobs, which is again very Moon Saturn related. Are you looking for the same kind of work? Like oil
Um,
fields, or what are you looking in, if you don't mind?
no, not necessarily. I'm open to almost anything. I've applied for at-home jobs. I've applied for, helping out in medical facilities. I right now am an inventory manager for a facility that machines medical, like surgical tools. Super easy job. I sit on my ass a lot. Excuse my language, but I sit on my butt a lot. 40 hours a week though, and unfortunately, I came in with the mentality that they were going to train me on the machines to mill and such and get trained in-house as a small company. And about a month and a half in, they laid off about 23 people and then told me the training's not going to happen and the overtime's not going to happen.
Right.
So,
Well, that is like pretty fitting for the kind of transit that you're going through right now because you talked about how, generally things have fallen in your lap and you've been having good luck, right? And I'm not surprised with that because you got Jupiter here who just stationed direct in your second house of resources, right? Trying your sun on the midheaven. Now, the thing is that this sun here is actually kind of afflicted in your chart, right? The sun is conjunct Ketu. And I've got this in whole sign houses, but in my preferred system, this would actually make it a ninth house sun conjunct Ketu, which could explain that's also a classic signature for, the father, there being some kind of affliction to the father. Now, what do I think is going on right now with Jupiter and why you are feeling unlucky at the moment? Well, that's because Jupiter right now is about to station right here at 11 degrees Gemini, right conjunct your south node. So it's like your good
And
luck
your
is
part of
being
fortune.
drained. Yeah, yeah. Your good luck is being drained here. It's also, Jupiter is also in the fourth sign from the moon, which is one of the more uh, bad transits, right? According to the Vedic Gochara system, any fourth position from the moon is basically the worst position. So once Jupiter goes into Cancer next year, it's going to be, or this year, it's going to be in Cancer, which is the fifth sign from the moon, which is a much, much better how sign for it to be in. It's also going to be from your ascendant in the 11th house. So, or under my system, it would be in the 10th house. So, either way, good house for it to be in. And you're also going to have that Venus Jupiter conjunction on your Mercury here in August. So I don't know if there was ever a time that felt like an auspicious time to try and take advantage of some good transits and apply for some jobs that you think might be out of your range, might not be able to get. I would look at that Jupiter Venus conjunction happening in Cancer in mid August as potential times to really go for it in terms of job applications.
Big time, or even be hearing back for something around then. It's been kind of sucky to tell so many clients, like, just wait until the second half of the year. But a lot of the astrology for everybody is very much like, look at the second half of the year for good things coming through. And like Alex just said, you've got a personal point being hit. Mercury is, you couldn't ask for a better planet for something related to commerce or business or employment or any of that whole process back and forth. That's the entire deal. Getting souped up by Jupiter, that looks like it could be an incredibly beneficial time for you.
That sounds great. I'm definitely reaching out to things that I'm qualified for, and hoping that they reach out back. But I'm always looking to do more, and especially something that allows me the time to reach to community around me. Given I live in Minneapolis, and there's a lot of opportunities that I have to miss that I
That's
can't
a
make,
really
and
cool city, by the way. I really like Minneapolis.
yeah, no, I'm loving it here. It's great, but oh,
Nice.
Beautiful. Anyways, this is my last thing to say about that, but like, not just stuff that you're qualified for. Like, that's an 11th house, the house of hopes and wishes, with an exalted, very like fertile, abundant Jupiter. Like, it's not outside the realm of reason to dream a little big, as far as what is. I know that they're like being in touch with the community and having more time to yourself, but like, add to that list as far as like, what's the ideal that we're reaching for? What is it that's what like Ketuvian South Node dissatisfaction is really good for. Like, you learn what it is by learning what it's not, right? What's not working in this job makes a really good list for what will work in the next one. You know what I mean?
yeah, of course. Yeah, keeping the chin up and looking for the best options. That's
And
all there is.
dancing.
And dancing, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I think that's a great perspective. I really appreciate you guys' time.
One
Thank you
one
for calling in.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. And just one last thing I wanted to point out here. You've got Venus and Mercury on either side of the sun here in the other signs, which is pretty good. And you see this a lot with people that are good at dealing with people, good managers, right? People that take instruction, take like they're put in charge of something by somebody else, right? And then they carry out those commands, right? So, um, it that could be, I don't know if you work in that kind of structure, but that would be something I feel like you'd be naturally good at, um, coordinating that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of my jobs have kind of fallen in that perspective, and I've always kind of been the dependable person.
Yeah,
Not to
nice.
toot my own bell, but like, it is. I just feel like any job I've been in, I've adapted so quickly to, and just kind of rocked with it. And so like, I've never been afraid of whatever, and like whatever field I'm in. I always feel like I can advance, but it's just excuse me, getting the opportunity to actually take that on is really all it takes for me. So, but like I said, keeping the chin up and looking for it, and that's how it goes.
Great. Well, that's awesome, Angel. Thank you so much for calling in and sharing your chart. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. You guys have a wonderful time. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, dude.
Bye.
I'm gonna remove you here so we can get more people in. Um, okay, next person. I think, well, D was up first, so he's back. Let's turn him back on. Hey, D.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Hi. Yes, we can hear you
Hi.
now. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm not good with the Google Chrome sometimes, so thank you for being patient.
No worries, no worries. Let's see. What is your chart information? Let me get
Yes,
that.
it is. I was born in Edmond, Oklahoma, August 22nd, 1999 at 3:40 a.m.
August 22nd,
Yeah, 1999.
3:40 a.m. All right. Here we go. All right. This look familiar?
Yes.
All right. Great. Good. That's what we want. All right. Well, since this is the node of special, okay, we've got another nodes in the second and the eighth, right? So, um, looks like, all right, so gonna be the same kind of areas of the body we're gonna be looking at as the last caller to determine which node is gonna be more dominant, right? If Rahu is the dominant node, then you would expect to have um, problems with the face, speech, like speech impediments, problems with teeth, um, eye issues, perhaps. If there is, if it's Ketu, then it would likely be something with the pelvis or the joints, knees, that kind of area. You are pretty young, so maybe you haven't had any health problems yet. Another way to look at this would be if it was Ketu dominant, which I think it might be in your case, then this Ketu in the eighth here is a highly kind of spiritual placement. Leads to, and it can also make someone very analytical and very good at parsing like numbers and documents. Can make people very good with like pattern recognition for that kind of stuff. You see a lot of astrologers with Ketu in the eighth. Also see a lot of accountants, people like that with Ketu in the eighth. So I don't know what. Based on all of that, which do you find is more resonant with your experience?
Well, I've had like 2 or 3 facial surgeries actually. I've
Oh,
had
okay.
a jaw surgery when I was like 15. I have a million dental works have done on me. My teeth are jank, and I promise I try. And I'm also like legally blind. I have horrible eyesight.
Well, then it definitely seems like it's Rahu then.
Yeah, for
Strong point.
sure.
Yeah. Um, Now, the thing is that your nodes are direct here. They're normally retrograde, but in your chart they're direct. So this is a special condition where you know how normally one of the nodes is dominant and the other one is basically inactive. When they're direct, you kind of get a quality of both. There's still one that's dominant over the other, but you still do get some of the effect of the opposing node. So I don't know if I would be willing to count out those kind of talents and abilities that I described about Ketu in the eighth as being inapplicable to you.
Okay, interesting. I did not realize that. So thank you for that information.
Yeah. Um, you've also got, all right, so just looking at your chart here, you've got, I mean, you got Venus retrograde conjunct the sun along with Rahu in the second. So, I mean, I guess that is probably going to be what is giving, a lot of energy pulling towards Rahu and giving those issues with like the facial stuff. Um, that could very easily be the case here. You also have Mars is square the sun, right? So Mars is pretty strong in your chart, and this kind of Mars. Um, where is Jupiter? Yeah, it's opposite Jupiter too, and opposite Saturn. So
If you have to hide the malefic somewhere, the 5th, 11th axis is definitely the best, but that's
yeah.
still a malefic opposition for sure.
Yeah, so malefic oppositions, they can be, intense, kind of, it can just make for people that have had, very intense life experiences. Like both my parents have this aspect in their chart and they've gone through some pretty wild stuff. Um, Jupiter here should help somewhat to keep the chaos kind of in check. And because Jupiter is trying your moon and the moon is not being really afflicted too badly by anything, I think that other than maybe these problems with your face, that otherwise physically you're pretty have a pretty high level of vitality and may even be athletic.
Yeah, I feel like I do have a lot of vitality. I currently work in a classroom with autistic children, and they're very high energy. And so I spend the whole day running around and one of them just loves to be picked up and like thrown around a little bit. And
That's
like,
so that is exactly that's what we were talking about with the malefic conjunction too. This is like work that is, you're working with very vulnerable population that needs a lot, somebody who does not flinch, right? And somebody who can really show up with whatever is required, especially in that fifth house, sort of early childhood. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful expression of this.
yeah, previously I also worked at a therapy center, and we only took low income clients, and we were like the only one in the state that did that back in Oklahoma. And so they would always pass me the phone. They're like, "Oh, you're great at talking to people. Take it." And I'm like, "Okay, sure, whatever. I got you."
So with the second house stellium, I have to ask, like, how are you with do you earn pretty comfortably? Are you pretty happy with where your salary goes, or do you find yourself ever like underemployed financially? Or
I feel like I'm good at getting jobs, but money wise, things have been rough this past like year and a half. I moved to the Twin Cities. Shout out to Angel over there. And um, it's been wild. My car blew up. Our cat con got stolen. I got laid off. So it's just been a wild ride since July of 23 is when I moved here.
was that our Venus retrograde in Leo in July?
That was the Venus retrograde in Leo.
Oh, wow.
Which
And
was
your
the
Venus
repeat of
return.
her natal. So she would have had a, because it would have been around, yeah.
Has like the dust settled? You said you're working now with autistic child. Is everything kind of, I don't know, Mars just went over quite a lot of your points too. So I could see some of that being reactivated, but
I think the dust has settled a bit, but I realized I want to change completely 100% what I'm doing. I feel like I've done a lot of work with, like you said, vulnerable populations. And now I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do that. I am ready to do something else. I don't know. I was looking into going to school to do like CAD stuff, like
Yeah.
you've got North Node eclipses coming to your ninth house. That's absolutely, and Jupiter is going to be in your first, who rules higher education. But that's very like Rahu's second house, like when it does get fired up, like that is like the moment of truth that sometimes comes where it's just kind of the second and the sixth are related. Like how much labor you have to turn over to somebody else in the sixth house is very dependent on the trine from the second house, how much you earn, right? The more you make for yourself, the more time that you get back, the less that you have to sort of like pimp your body out or your mental well-being or stress, then the less time that you spend in the sixth house serving someone else or someone else's agendas. And so the North Node there, when it gets fired up with all that ambition to begin with, and then your sun and two of your personal planets with Mercury and Venus, like those callings, like that's actually, you're making plans that fit really well with where the North Node is about to be transiting in your chart. And it's unlikely to be a fluke, I would say. Like I would really, really, really explore that more, because that's kind of like you already picking up quite a lot of loud signals that are about to become much louder as Jupiter and those eclipses start to make their way through. What did you say you wanted to study?
CAD, and it's like a software that's used a lot for design, usually applicable to architecture or engineering. And then I'm
Just
also
like Alex was saying with your eighth house and the pattern recognition and the being able to handle details.
Yeah, I like that work. And, I also have several artistic pursuits, and I like that it's work that I wouldn't do in my free time.
Well, let's just take a look at what is going on with this chart and the eclipse in September, because wait, no, we want yeah, because that's in September. We can just animate this forward. September 21. Oh, wait, no, it's September 15th. That's the one we want. That's September 7th. Here we go. Where's the
Yeah, you've got
yeah.
Jupiter on your ascendant, and you've got the North Node hovering around your part of fortune. It doesn't not look like education.
So yeah, there's the eclipse, which is near the part of fortune, and then Jupiter is right here on the ascendant during that eclipse. So, and this, I mean, if you did sign up for classes, they would be starting around September.
And you have a Venus return that's happening, and it's going to be activating your second house North Node too. Looking at like new ways. Like, I really like the examples that Alex gave. I don't know if you were like tuned in for the beginning, because like, especially with L. Ron Hubbard, you see this moment where the nodes are being activated, and that's not the whole story, but that's the linchpin of where a very long narrative ended up unfolding from, you know, as far as being a very specific moment that something happens. It's electional astrology, right? We look at the stars of a moment to see where it could, how auspicious, how it could unfold, and that's really a very good looking lineup for you for that particular pursuit.
Yeah,
That,
no, I don't know how long this certification would be, but it looks like according you'd be having your nodal reversal in 2027. So if it's a 2 year in the spring of 2027, June 2027. So if it is a 2 year program that starts in 2025 and ends in spring 2027.
With
So
Jupiter on your second house sign, no less.
yeah, and then Jupiter's here on your benefics. I mean, that could, you know,
That's
if you end up
sexy.
going this fall, then this could very easily look like graduation.
that sounds really amazing. I'm also a writer, and that guy you were referring to is also a writer. Am I
Mhm.
correct? Am I tripping?
L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, wrote thousands upon thousands of pages of all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool because I'm also actively pursuing publication as well. I do. Yeah.
Yeah, you have Mercury conjunct North Node in your second house. That is a beautiful expression. I can only imagine what you would be able to churn out if you got started. Like, do you actively write now, or?
I do. And you know what? I got the best rejection letter recently. It made me so happy. Do you ever get those rejection letters where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm almost there when it comes to any pursuits you've
Is that what
done?
it said? It was like, are you almost here?
Well, it was like for a national competition, and everyone applying had like an MFA or whatever, which is like a Master in Fine Arts and Writing. And they're like, wow, we really liked your stuff. We're not picking you, but we really liked your stuff. And I'm like, awesome.
That's amazing, especially considering like the MFA girls are impressive, definitely, with everything. And they should be after that kind of education, but holding your own and getting like recognized outside of that is something to be very proud of. I'm impressed for you.
And also like I really appreciate that y'all are like Saturn North nodes. I my all my family is like Capricorn and Aquarius like people. So I just have a very deep love for Saturn energy too. Like
Nice.
I just love that for y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I've grown to
thank
love
you.
it. It's actually one of my favorite placements now, but it has its moments. When it acts up, I'm sure Alex has stories too. When it
Yeah.
definitely, like, you have to either you master the Saturn, or Saturn masters you pretty quickly with that one.
Yeah, I have Saturn in Capricorn, and I have Rahu and Aquarius conjunct the IC, so I guess that's my trickster placement. Um, all right, well, it's great. Thank you for coming on and allowing us to read your chart, Dee. It was really great.
Yeah, no. It's been so exciting to hear about everyone. So you're so yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, yeah, we just have a lot of people calling in, so we
Oh,
got to keep this moving. But I really appreciate uh, you coming on. All right, let's move on to let's try and do someone else. I think this person called in next. Amaya, hi, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, although you are a little bit quiet. Is it possible to turn your microphone up a little?
Is this any better? No.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Okay.
What's your birth time
Yeah.
or
So
day?
it's the 15th of August 2001.
Beautiful birth time.
5:53 a.m.
Emily,
And birthplace.
Oxford, United Kingdom.
are you pulling this up on your own?
I
screen, Emily?
am.
All right, so then I can use what I want. All right.
This is so exciting.
Do we have Leo rising?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sun is the first, conjunct your sun. Ooh, bright and shiny.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of sun energy from there.
Okay, you have. Oh, wow. Jupiter is going to be Jupiter in Cancer is going to be a big one for you.
Okay.
That is a Jupiter North Node conjunction with exalted Jupiter in the 12th house. I'll see what Alex says. I immediately want to know what your relationship with spirituality is. And yeah, actually, I do want to know that. Do you have a spiritual bent? Do you have I don't know if that was me. Paranormal.
I think that was her.
Sorry. I get visited a lot, especially by my family that have passed, like a lot. And my dad also picks up on it. He's like, he often says to me, like, you are doing things, like you are behaving in ways of family members you've never met. And I kind of get the urge to do things sometimes. Like I want, like, when there's years, I got the urge one day to pinch his ear, and he looks at me and he went, "No, my grandma used to do that to me." And I was like, "Oh, sorry."
Wow.
So you do have some experience, some natural experience with mediumship.
I think so. Yeah. I get in dreams in my sleep. About a year after my uncle passed, he came and visited me in a dream, and he gave me a hug. And I woke up from it, and my entire body was like tingling, vibrating. It was so beautiful.
Pretty much like positive experiences. You've never had anything like freak you out?
Not so far, no.
That's very exalted Jupiter in the 12th. That's a very like kind of guardian angel placement, where just like the first contact with these unseen places is comfortable. I don't know what you would call it, guides, subjects trying to seek things through you.
I mean, personally, I have noticed a pattern of people that tend to be like naturally sensitive to spirits or other kind of like energy stuff, and seem to naturally like they might, be able to, have dreams where, dead loved ones come to them. That there's a lot of like the outer planets making really, really exact aspects to like the sun or the moon or Mercury. And in this case, it's Uranus basically, within a degree of just being exact. It's like,
the opposition for sure.
Yeah. So, that, I mean, I agree with what you were saying, Emily, about this up here, but then this adds, I think, to it, and then there's also, I mean,
Saturn, Pluto,
Saturn and
Mars
Pluto.
situation.
Yeah.
How is your health, out of curiosity, with your 6th house stuff? Like, do you find yourself ever injury or illness prone, or?
I have a lot of kidney issues. I don't know if that is picked up anywhere. And I'm very health conscious, but I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm illness or accident prone.
That's good. The South Node in the 6th house, I mean, it sounds like for quite a lot of reasons, and just the North Node having more contacts and being conjunct your Jupiter and also co-present your Venus in Cancer, where this one is really the more well-resourced one. But obviously, like a South Node in a place of loss with the 6th house, it is one of the tougher places to host it. When it does get activated, you like there's so much pressure off of Capricorn now with Pluto being out of there. Like there's not a ton of activations that I could see coming around that are going to be very problematic for it anymore. But in the last couple of years, I could see this being when Capricorn was more of a hotbed of like everything that's been going on that could have been very tricky for you.
Yeah, the last few years, the last 3-4 years, I've been very like kidney issue and getting diagnosed as well happened in the last like year.
Oh, good.
So it was, yeah, maybe that's
so
why
for then it was kind of like a hidden, like what's happening here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting that you mention the kidneys because the sixth house here is associated in Vedic astrology with the kidneys, right? And she asked about your health issues because of Ketu here by the sixth house, and yeah, kidneys fall under that house according to the Vedic breakdown. So that's interesting. That
that's
body part is
good.
affected. However, I do think that in your chart that the North Node in the 12th is going to be the more dominant. I know it says 11th here, but they're right on the cusp, so we move them into the 12th. So the 12th house, like basically, if it's good, if it's a strong node, right? Because it's conjunct Jupiter, it's going to give genuine spiritual insight and kind of stuff like that. However, if it was conjunct, if Rahu was like amplifying something like Saturn, right, or Mars, or some outer planet, something bad, right, then you would see like psychosis and the mental instability and stuff like that manifest too. But since it's conjunct the benefics, it should be limited to that when your mind is kind of permeated by the spiritual forces, it's for a good effect rather than a disruptive one, right? At least that's how you seem to describe it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. When you said psychosis, did you say I had indicators? I had
I know. I said if this North
okay.
Node was closer to like Saturn. Well, there. So I mean, the North Node in the 12th can lead to mental instability generally, right? That's what a lot of the old texts say. But um, I was saying that I feel like your propensity for that is mitigated by the fact that the both benefics are there in the 12th house as well. So you might have some, I mean, every one of us goes a little bit crazy every once in a while, right? But
Yeah.
it probably won't be like, bad enough that you're, you spend several years in a psych ward or something, right? Like,
Has anything already happened that sounds like similar to that?
I had a religious psychosis episode, but I was quite young. It was very weird. I thought that everyone around me wanted me to be a new messiah kind of thing. I thought that there was a pressure on me from external forces to be like a messiah.
Right. Well,
Really, like that's also very Jupiter North Node from another area. To get how like woo can you handle right now? Because
Go for it.
Okay, cool. I don't know if you've looked into the fields of parapsychology at all, which is very much like there's a lot of information that you can get. Not a lot of it is like, it is kind of one of the woo branches of where things go through, but it is not uncommon in any way, shape, or form to see people that have latent psychic abilities that come up with quite a lot of mental, what looks like psychological weirdness as they're making themselves known, especially in an early childhood age. There's just kind of colloquially people like say things like, the mystic swims in the waters where the ordinary man would drown. And there's kind of like, it can be called shamanic illness in some traditions. This whole pattern of kind of where before you learn how to navigate in these very psychic realms that are opening up places that could look like psychosis or could be the most productive channeling session you've ever had. They're sort of they need to be kind of trained in the same way if you are going to use them. And there's a huge body of, I wish I could think of some stuff right now. Mitch Horowitz has a lot of stuff where he's really like getting well into it that you might like. But that is definitely, I don't know, studying deeper into some of that occult stuff might be really calming for you to see that these aren't that isolated of experiences. And the fact that you've kind of been able to transition into a more like well-rounded embodiment of these gifts, gifts in quotation marks, that you're obviously, your mind and your spirit are working with, is a good sign. But there's a lot to learn about how this very specific kind of mystical mind of yours works, and that's definitely the place to go to find some more self-knowledge if you're interested in developing any of that.
That sounds great. I've just looked up Mitch Horowitz, so I'll have a look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, he's wonderful. He's got really, do you like Mitch Horowitz, Alex?
Yeah. No, he's good. I do just want to, say here that the moon here, also means that you can get really kind of swept into the channeling and stuff, and it kind of takes your whole body. So I wonder if these kind of things could be draining for you, right? And would just say, like with everything, approach it, with a grain of salt and like a step at a time, right? There's
Yeah.
no need to like throw yourself into stuff, because if you you have a predilection for getting carried away, you want to try and counteract against that. So I would just, I am all open for alternative stuff and theories about this stuff. I think a lot of it is true, but also, the occult is, kind of notorious for making people go crazy, right? It's kind of like every famous occultist, like the best you can hope for is that, you're famous because of the crazy way in which you wasted your life trying to figure this out and ended up going nuts, right? So,
That's a very fair addendum. Yeah.
Just beware of that, right? You don't want to end up like Aleister Crowley, right? So, that's all I'll say about that.
Sage Ketu conjunct midheaven advice for all.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Okay, well, should we we do have like a lot of callers on the line. Should we keep going?
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
I'm having so much fun.
Yeah. All right, let's do one more. Thank you so much,
Thank
Maya,
you,
for
guys.
calling
Thank you
in.
very much.
All right.
That is a nice 12th house, though.
I think Tia has been waiting. Hello, Tia. How are you?
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I'm good, thank you.
How's your Friday going?
Oh, sorry. It's like early Saturday morning for me.
Oh.
Yeah.
That echo. That's
Oh, should I?
good.
Is that me?
Oh yeah, it was you.
Is it better?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
No worries. Tia, what is your birth information, if you don't mind?
So I was born in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, 18 September 1999.
What time?
10:37 p.m.
Your echoes on Emily.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening or why that just started.
10:37 p.m. You said?
Yep, that's right.
All right. And could you spell the name of the?
Oh, the city Kuala.
All right.
With a space and then Lumpur.
It's a back.
What
I
is
don't know why it's doing that. Okay, let's see here. Um, you are Taurus rising, Capricorn moon, Virgo sun.
Yep, that's me.
All right. All right. Yeah, Emily, what is going on with that?
I have no idea. I'm not sure what to. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, maybe we'll just mute you unless you're gonna talk or something. I don't know.
Yeah, just mute it for now. Let me like.
Okay. Um, so here we go. Okay, so you have the nodes here, um, the angles. Um, so we were talking about the moon or the Ketu conjunct the midheaven earlier, right? And how this is a person that kind of, doesn't really care what other people think. Like they're fine with being perceived. It's kind of like, like, yeah, let them look. Like there's people that are kind of leaders, right? And, your Mars is strong because, it's square the sun. So, and it's, the moon is close to Mars. So, you will probably have a disposition that you can take charge, right? Like if there is a gap in what should be done, you could probably assert yourself as a leader. You also have this Venus, which is very nice. This Venus down here, it's a good elongation from the sun, and it's on the angle. So this would make someone that I mean, it is not yet to 30 degrees. It's approaching 30 degrees, so it's like increasing in power. Um, I would say that it would make someone attractive. It would also, uh, perhaps, the home is kind of very beautiful, and the person likes to spend a lot of time at home and making it nice, right? They might uh, entertain guests a lot. So I think the Venus here conjunct the North Node, is really nice. Now it is um the problem is it's in the eighth house from the eighth sign from the moon, right? So yeah, because yep, it is in the eighth from the moon. So this can sometimes maybe your generosity and hospitality can be your own undoing, right? It's you know, Venus is a kind of a lover and an enemy at the same time, and it can be really nice, but then there's also this sense of like, kind of screwing yourself over because you want the Venus stuff a little bit too much.
I think thanks guys. I think the you were definitely spot on about the part where I tend to take charge or not really care what other people think in terms of perception. But I feel like it's more so how people would describe me. I think it took me a while to kind of recognize or see myself that way.
Mm. Was there any? All right.
All right.
Oh, sorry.
Why is that?
Why is that me?
What?
What the?
Is the echo back?
Yeah.
Yeah, the echo.
I don't know if
I don't know if
anyone else
anyone else can hear it. It's just me.
Oh, I can't hear it, but I think it seems to happen when I have my mic on.
Oh.
Oh.
All right.
All right. Well,
What about the stuff with the Venus that I described? Was any of that
any of that
register?
register?
I think yeah, I definitely do spend a lot of time at home. I love it's like my safe space. I think I love making it look good. It's my favorite space in the world. Um, I'll have to look out for overextending myself for for love.
Um,
Emily, did you have anything you wanted to say about this?
What did you guys already talk? What do you do for a living?
Well, let's try and
let's
guess.
try and guess.
Yeah.
Come on.
Come on.
Let's see. I would say perhaps there's it may do something with the education, or uh, could also could also be one of the like in some kind of manager role, right? Where they're like in charge of people to some extent.
Is that you, Tia?
I think I just started my job. I just started my career 2 years ago. I have a corporate role. We do investments, but I've always wondered with the nodes being on my midheaven, like how that would affect me at some point, given that Uranus is also there. But yeah, I have a corporate job currently.
Is this corporate job um uh do you work like are you working directly with numbers, or you're just doing the transactions, you don't have um anything going on where you're managing people?
I think not currently, just, because I'm still new. Like I'm just 2 years into my job.
Well, yeah, you are quite young still. You're born 1999, so you're only, I mean, you're not even 26 yet. So I would say that that could be something that comes in later in your life, and that, if you did continue to work in corporate environment, you could probably move your way up quite quickly into doing some kind of manager type of thing where you are, in charge of teams of people. I could see that very easily with this chart. You'd probably find success with that. I unmuted you now.
Oh, okay.
All of you are unmuted now.
Perfect. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. That all sounds kind of amazing.
All right, thank you guys.
Okay. One second here. Um, all right. Do you want to do one more? Or are you kind of tapping out?
Let's do one more.
All right. All right. Okay. Gonna have time for like one more person. Sid, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. All right. Let's get your chart pulled up here.
Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I wasn't expecting on being called.
Well, I'm glad you're excited. I'm excited too. What's your birthday?
Yeah, it's 4/23, 1998.
What time?
12:43 p.m. And the city is Washington, D.C. I'm sorry if you hear crackling in the back. I'm making cod. That's cooking.
Did you
It's
say
okay.
cod?
Yeah, I'm making some codfish.
What kind?
I made like black miso cod.
No, I do miso mirin cod and mashed cauliflower. It's like my favorite comfort food.
Absolutely divine. It's incredible.
You have good taste. Let's see what in your chart shows this. Mm-hmm. Ooh, another Jupiter South node. Wait, is this right? Your Leo rising?
Yes, this is correct.
Okay. With the Taurus Sun Mars conjunction. Oh, that's really. Wow, that's kind of beautiful because you have both benefics in a position they really like. You've got Jupiter in Pisces, domiciled, Venus in Pisces, exalted. With the moon, I personally think the moon likes Pisces quite a lot, and the South Node all in your eighth house, which would not be, typically speaking, the eighth house is just not one that we necessarily want to send planets to, but this is a very beneficial lineup, all
Oh,
things
thank you.
considered. Do you do anything with investments, psychology? There's like
Yeah, it's funny because I actually work in like financial regulation.
amazing.
So I guess it like it's like I think very it's like that and I guess like Saturnian in some ways.
Yeah, because your Saturn midheaven on the ninth too. And ninth is kind of like where the bureaucracies, not to say that you work in a bureaucracy, but you know what I mean. The
Yeah.
institutions start to like apply the laws and make those regulations that get enforced in the 10th. Do you like it?
Yeah, I do. I think it's like it's been really eye-opening. I think like understanding how like financial institutions work and as well as like um especially understanding the communities that they serve and things like that. So it's really affirming work, I think. And
Yeah.
important work I'm coming to realize.
Yeah, this is yet another. We're getting a lot of charts with nodes in the second and the eighth.
I know. It's really been a beautiful.
Yeah, and this is yet another example of the nodes in the second and the eighth giving very good analytical abilities, very good pattern recognition, working with numbers. Astrologers are common with that. This kind of nodal placement too. Also, like investigators, people that are building databases, looking at information and trying to find patterns in it. As coming through yet again with another example on the show, which is so cool. I love it when we get that like
That's a heater.
yeah.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh man, I hate to be like the third person maybe now with the same like
No,
like
it's
yes.
awesome because you can also identify like as other people are getting like the same thing read. And then we've had like I think 3 different Mars Saturn oppositions. Um it's just a beautiful way that like the synchronicity matrix kind of starts firing off whenever these things happen. It's the field that gets established. Um yeah, do you have any questions about like what the eclipses look like coming up? You have a nodal return coming up to your eighth house.
Yeah, I would love to know like if there's like anything I should look out for because I've heard it's like going to be important, but I think it's like I feel a shift coming. Of course, that could just be like speculative, but I'm just like curious to know like if there's like any insight of what I should look out for because granted it's like happening across like very important placements with also the nodal opposition as well.
Yes.
Um so
Yeah, so that the nodal opposition is something I was talking about in the beginning of the show, where it can be like turning points in people's lives, right? Where things that later stay with them for years or the rest of their life, like, kind of come into fruition, right? And really, everyone online freaks out about the Saturn return, right? It's probably like one of the most talked about transits that people go through and how, oh shit, it's the Saturn return. I really think it's this one. This is the nodal reversal. This is like the drama, right, that comes. And this is like the shakeup before the Saturn return happens. And they can be, pretty wild times. But they can also be times of culmination and achievement, and also times of new beginning, right? Um, you know, I, for me personally, one of these nodal reversals was discovering astrology, whereas another one was, graduating from school, right? So they can also, they don't necessarily have to be, you know, they're pivotal times in people's lives where things shift and change, right? Now, sometimes that can be more dramatic and more more eventful or less, that depending on other things that are going on. One thing that makes me think that it could be slightly, isolating or difficult emotionally to deal with is that you're going to have Saturn doing a triple pass over your moon during these eclipses. And so that's going to give a melancholy Saturnine feel to these Pisces Virgo eclipses. Um, there could be, changes in living situation, right? You could very easily, I think, relocate or move to another house during, the next 18 months while this transit's going on because of that Saturn activation of the moon during the eclipses. But, you also have the benefics there in Pisces. And, so I think you should, trust that it'll be for the best, right? Even if the Saturn makes it suck in the moment. I would just keep in mind that, it's an 18-month period where a lot's going to change. And, but if you can, I mean, Saturn conjunct the moon, almost always gives, in addition to its burdens, a corresponding increase in status, an increase in responsibility, right? So, Saturn going across your moon 3 times is, well, it might be difficult in the moment. I think that what it comes out of it will be worth it.
Definitely. Definitely. No, that sounds good. Yeah, I feel like I can feel it like building up, or at least like it's pretty far, or it's not super far, but I like in terms of like the isolation or just like changes in friendships or friend groups or thinking about like who I align with and things I think are really prevalent, especially now. So yeah, no, that definitely makes sense.
And you're going to have Jupiter is going to be in your 12th house through quite a lot of this, and being ruled by the moon, that is, it's a very tricky thing because like Alex is completely right. There's some challenges that are coming up there, but you also have the benefics and dark houses, but they are there, they're all kind of like woven into the situation. So a lot of times you can have sort of like the best of times and the worst of times. But, as somebody who also like lives with besieged benefics, that also kind of looks like something that starts out with a really jarring tenor and works up in your best interest in the end. It's kind of one of those periods where, like, I think Alex said it really well, but anything can happen, but it's too soon when it's happening. Like, take care of yourself and do the best stuff that's going on, but don't necessarily write chaotic or sort of like circumstances that get interrupted if it is a move or something else like that. Don't write it off as like the worst thing that's ever happened to you right away, because that really could be a segue into something that you could not have established in any other way without a break coming to some sort of lunar resource or system of caring for yourself, which can be a very Saturn conjunct moon over and over and over again. That's a hot spot. Those final degrees of Pisces in your 8th house are about to get like really lit up. So there's definitely some exciting stuff happening there.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Like the Venus and Mercury retrograde, like also happening there. Like I just had an eclipse like really close to my moon this like past September. So it definitely feels like a hot button point. But you're right. I definitely think, especially over the past like few months of having Saturn, at least like in that realm or co-present with the moon, it's like realizing, like you said, like these really hard emotional decisions, but also realizing on the flip side of how like there's so much wisdom to gain from even agony in some points. And so, yeah, no, I definitely hear that. I definitely hear.
Yeah, because like the ruler of your 12th is in your 8th house. Those are both like, I have a 12th house moon. So like I said, I have a lot of resonance with what's going on here. But these are houses that, because they're dark houses to speak of, like these are normally things that can have very beneficial significations, but they're not the first houses that you would ever seek out placements in up until the moment that you've learned how to deal with the significations. And with the 12th house, that's how do you deal with isolation? How do you deal with things that have to be born alone. You know, the eighth house can be subjects that are taboo and can't be easily brought up to friends and family members, you know, but can be tremendously, especially with benefics there, very formative and beneficial in the long run, because you know things about subjects that other people do not once you really embrace them. So that attitude, period. And this is just like with the North Node energy coming in there, like really coming to a place to where whatever is happening with your eighth house from this point on, it's going to be a subject of like, say after this, you're going to be really comfortable maneuvering through all that kind of stuff and finding a way, your way, that it works for you and how you like to express it best, which is really important with the dark houses. That's when everything kind of turns around.
Yeah, no, definitely. That sounds like, yeah. I definitely like really do feel that, which I like you said, I think like valuing like those dark moments in order to like build that wealth of like self-knowledge and maneuvering is like it seems very thematic for sure. For
It
sure.
is like, I mean, I'm like a dark house enthusiast because this is kind of like that shows an innate ability to work through areas that everybody's going to have eighth house activity at some point without the placements there, right? Like everyone's going to have someone they love die. Everybody's going to have a bill that they have to pay at some point. Everyone's going to have in the 12th house, everyone's going to have to spend time by themselves at some point that they might not have wanted to. It's very jarring sometimes when people don't have any placements here or have any of that energy, kind of like archetypal energy living within them. And it leaves a fragility when you got really big transits through here, as far as like just being completely out of your league when big energy moves. And that's not something you're going to have to worry about. By the time that you get done with this is going to be a level of comfort and ease in the hard moments, which is kind of the best situation that you want to have, like, because it's in you. It's just embodied wisdom at that point, and not something where you have to kind of like worry about losing your head every time this gets tapped up. But eighth house, dark house benefics and transits, they're quiet, they're secretive. It's sometimes not easy to see. Like hidden angels is definitely one of my best favorite descriptors for them, because they aren't necessarily loud with the good fortune. Sometimes you have to like look back and look under many layers of things to see like, oh wow, that was exactly how it had to go, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. I couldn't agree more. Which, yeah, which is like good to hear that I'll at least like be a lot more resourced, like emotionally, like spiritually, like holistically, like after these moments because yeah, I'm definitely like a little bit worried, but like you said, I think it'll be for the better after for sure.
Yeah, this is really like Alex kind of like pointed out the right period for sure. Things are after this one, it's a whole new thing for you. And it's at least a very condensed period of activity, right? Like you definitely go into like it's for the plot for the next 2 years. Like
Yeah,
everything is
yeah.
just like
I would expect the next 18 months to be pretty eventful.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But you are having some good transits to balance that out. I mean, you're gonna have, um, you know, Jupiter is gonna be in the fifth position from your moon, which is really good. It's gonna be in Cancer, even though it's in your 12th house natally. I feel like the Jupiter and Cancer transit will be good, and that should hopefully, support some of the things when you go through that nodal reversal. And we shouldn't be dramatic about it or make it seem, it's just, these are time periods where a lot of people, things are shaken up, right? And so, but you can handle the shake up. I mean, you've got these malefics by your sun, right? Like you're used to things being hard, so you can handle it.
No, thank you so much, Alex and Emily. I really appreciate it. This is really encouraging to hear.
Thank
Well,
you for letting us see this beautiful chart for sure.
Of
Tenacity
course.
here.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This whole like segment and stream has been so cool to watch. So I really, really appreciate it.
thank
Thank
you
you,
for coming
Alex,
on.
for
Yeah.
hosting it for us.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't do it without callers like you.
Oh,
So
thank you.
yeah, no, I'm glad you are willing to share your life and your chart with all of us so that we can all learn and enjoy it. It's really nice.
Thanks again.
All right. You're welcome. Um, okay, so
My puppy is dying and yelling at me. So we
you need to go.
probably coming up
Yes. So
soon.
um, there is a guy here. He's messaging in the private chat. He says he wants on. He says, "Let me on. I have a lot to say." Keith Jackson Farber. Uh, sounds like an interesting character. You wanna hear what this guy has to say?
Sure.
All right, all right. We'll give him a chance because we're done with the readings. But looks like this guy's got something. Keith, hello. What are you? How are you?
Alex, are you reading me? Are you reading me loud and clear?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Is is Alex your preferred pronoun, or do you have a different one?
I don't care. You call me whatever you want.
I'm gonna call you Alex. It's how I know you. I love your stream. I've been watching for a while now. Um, my family's very irritated with me. I'm always watching. I'm watching at 4 a.m. I'm watching at 3 a.m. I'm watching at all hours of the day, really. But before I get into what I want to talk about with you on the stream, I want to apologize first and foremost. I just want to apologize
Apologize
because,
for what?
well, we all know. I mean, astrology is a queer space. It's a female space.
Right.
I'm a cis male. And that's just the way it is. That's the way whatever spirit made me, that's how he made me. And I don't like it any more than you do. But I am.
Right.
And
Okay.
so my intention here is not to intrude on a queer space, intrude on a feminine space, but simply to share my thoughts with you.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
And so I just want to say sorry.
right. Okay. Well, you don't have to apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well,
But I'm hoping that maybe we can come to a resolution here because,
a
I
resolution. Is there a
mean,
problem?
well, I watch your stream.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been following you on Twitter for a while now.
Right.
And I love astrology. I don't understand it, but I love it. And I love what you do with it. And I love your stream. But the problem that I'm having is that you're putting out energy into this space that I feel like is determining what happens almost. Because I mean, so a few streams ago, I can't even remember how many streams ago, you predicted that Trump would win.
Right.
And I found that very troubling because I love astrology. My wife loves astrology. My children, because I've introduced astrology to them, they love astrology. But we are all so troubled because the idea that astrology could predict this, one of the worst things that's ever happened, and it's unprecedented. It's never happened before. That we get
What? That Trump's been elected?
He has.
Yeah, he has
This
been
is the second
elected.
time he's been elected.
Well, that's not the point. The point is it's unprecedented in our time.
Right. Right.
Okay, and it's been causing my family a lot of stress because they
Why
all
are
love
you
your
hating
show.
on astrology for? I mean, well, look, that is what happened. He did get elected, right?
I'm
So
happy
I'm not sure of
to
another
that
time a fascist dictator has ever been supported at large by an entire country to the point where everybody's like, let's do what this fascist guy says. When has that happened?
Right. I mean, aside from, like Germany and
Well, that's what it's like.
right, okay. I
So
mean,
why are we blaming Alex for this? Let's go
I'm
back.
not there's no blame, guys. There's no blame here. There's no blame. I'm not trying to blame anyone. What I'm saying is that Alex is responsible for what has happened. So there's no blame.
Did Alex spoke it into existence?
right,
Well,
right.
in a way, I mean, I just have a hard time trusting astrology when it can predict, when it can tell me that, look, when I went to bed, okay, on the eve of election night, whatever it was, November. I didn't actually vote, so I can't remember when
Why are you
the
complaining
deadline
then?
was. I'm sorry?
Why are you complaining if you didn't vote?
You didn't.
Well, I didn't think I needed to. I thought that people would make the right decision.
Right.
And also, I live in a, full disclosure, I live in a red state. I know, but I do. But what
Right,
happened was,
okay.
I went to sleep in a place that respected queer people, who's not me. I'm an ally, but respected allies of queer people like myself.
Right. Okay.
And queer people and women. And I woke up in what you said. I woke up in Nazi Germany. And so I don't know if we have to censor that, or can I say the N word? Nazi, the other one.
Right. Okay.
It's not the
dude, I don't think it's Nazi Germany. I think that's going a little bit far.
Well, it seems to be Nazi Germany to me. And I mean, my daughter's upset about it. My wife's upset about it. My wife is so upset. I mean, they're losing sleep over it. Okay. So my wife's a nurse. She's an ER nurse. She has odd hours. She has to get up very early, and she's losing sleep over it. I'll be, and granted, I am waking her up in the middle of the night because I'll see something that, Trump has tweeted on Truth Social or Truthed or Retruthed or whatever it is on Trump on Truth Social, and I'll tell her, and I'll wake her up and I'll say, honey, have you seen the latest Trump tweet? And she's like, I have to go to work tomorrow, but she's losing sleep over this. Do you understand? It's affecting real people.
You guys are waking her up.
Like you're like, what?
Well, she needs to know.
She's not losing sleep over Trump. She's losing sleep over you, like sticking Trump's tweets.
She needs to know.
That's violent.
And that's part of the problem.
I mean,
and my daughter's the same way. My daughter has to get up at 7 a.m. for school.
Midnight mansplaining.
Right, like this doesn't.
I never want to do that.
Right.
I never want to do that.
You never want to do what? Mansplain?
Well, I don't want to explain any. I don't even want to. I don't want to do anything involving that. I don't want to man anything. I just
right.
So my wife is so distressed about it. She's not been getting any sleep, and so she's gone to live with her long-term partner.
The partner is.
Well, I'm aware of him. I mean, so she's poly. I'm not.
Right. Okay.
So she's poly. I'm not. So she has a she's got a boyfriend, she says she wants to marry him.
Is that what you're telling us? Your wife's got a boyfriend.
It's not a boyfriend. It's a long-term partner. I'm not sure.
Long-term partner. Okay. Right. Well.
And now that Joe Biden's dead, I mean, this country probably is.
Joe Biden is not dead.
Didn't someone die yesterday?
That's David Lynch.
Okay, well, the Joe Biden equivalent, at least in what did David Lynch do again? He wasn't president, was he?
Nobody should have been, by a lot of accounts.
Exactly. Thank you. And if the snapping is too loud, I can jazz hands or whatever. But look, Alex, I just don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm at a point here where my job is being impacted. Okay, and my family's.
Where do you work?
Well, my family's losing sleep, and I know I show up for work at Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm an HR rep though, so I'm not a CEO or anything.
Right. Okay.
But I show up for work at Anthem, and people are like, "Oh my God, are you okay?"
Are you?
And I say, "No, I'm not okay." But I've been up
saying that you're a human resources when really you're a claims adjuster.
A claims adjuster. What a thing to be these days.
I know,
at one point, I was a claims adjuster. That's true, but I work in HR now.
Right. So you wake your daughter and your mom and your wife up in the middle of the night, and so much to the fact that she's ran off to her boyfriend, and you work.
It's not her. It's her long-term partner.
Right.
Okay. So I'm not sure why you. Also, his gender is not really clear to me.
But somehow, but you've got a problem with me. All right. So what's your, why?
Well, how do you explain yourself? I mean, how can I trust astrology if it's going to make Trump win?
Being fair, Alex, he's not the first to say that you spoke this into existence.
You did.
Honestly, there was that was going around the group chats for quite some time. That this was actually you and.
I'm not sure what kind of powers you have.
Right. I've done some magic spell to make Trump win.
Exactly. It was
Yeah.
a very bold call if you remember the situations around it. I can see where the suspicion is coming from, Keith. I feel you.
Well, thank you. I mean, thank you. And it's nice to be validated, and it feels good to be validated. It feels good to be validated in a feminine space, in a queer space. And, I know I'm an intruder here, and I don't want to overstay my welcome. But the point is, this is impacting my family. It's impacting my livelihood. And I needed to make that clear to you, Alex. And I'm sorry if that's not your preferred pronoun, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it because you need to be called
Alex
out.
is a name,
I don't understand the difference. But I'm an ally.
Right.
My name's not Allie,
Well, look,
but I am an ally.
Detransitioned recently. I switched back. So are you still an ally? Right? Does the allyship only for?
Well, look, I don't, I'm an ally to any queer person, and judging by the lisp in your voice, it does sound like you are still queer. So I'm an ally. As long as you're still out there sucking whatever it is you're sucking, I'm out there supporting you.
Oh, I know. Okay. All right. Where's you? Dude, what the hell?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. Okay. I'm here to be supportive and here to be an ally. So I'm sorry.
Right. Okay. All right. Well,
I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
sorry.
Thank you for your supports. All right.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Say a hi to your wife's boyfriend for me.
This is the long-term partner.
All right. All right, dude. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Keith.
Goodbye.
Well, you've been exposed, Alex.
Yeah, I guess
Everybody knows your sorcery ways now.
I know. The black magic. I mean, Trump did give me a lot of money. All right. That's why I quit my job as a lawyer. Right. Because I don't need to anymore. It's because of the payoff from Trump for doing the black magic to help him win.
Now it all makes sense.
It all makes sense. It all makes perfect sense. All right. Okay, guys, that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Astro Live. I'm Alex Harper, and I've been joined by the lovely Emily. Emily, where can people find you?
I am on Twitter at Imogen. I think it's set up there. And then I have a Substack as well called the Venus Chronicles that you can come through. I write something rambling once or twice a week. Try to keeping up on deeper views on what's going on in astrology. And you can find me to book me for anything through either of those.
Yes, and I'm Alex Harper, and you can find me on Twitter at Baleful Rays. Also on most of the other apps with the same username. YouTube is Astrology Deathmatch, although I am going to be changing that name since I'm doing more of these Astro Lives than I am the game shows. The Astro Live should be more of a frequent thing. I know there was a lot of callers weren't able to get to, but reading these charts for a couple hours on end can be exhausting, especially with no prep. So we can't do these marathon sessions, but I am gonna probably be going live more by myself soon, and maybe having a guest or two along the way. So I'm trying to get it to be more of like a weekly or bi-weekly thing rather than a monthly thing as it's been. So if you keep calling in, sorry we didn't get to everyone today, but it's been a lovely show, and I want to thank Emily for joining me and talking about the nodes with me. I think we had a really cool discussion. It was fun collaborating.
Yeah, so thank you so much. This is just really everything I thought it would be. I appreciate you.
Great. Well, I appreciate you too. Thank you guys so much. And